Right, well, it's the morning after the night before and another night of great disappointment on the football front. I'm sure you were watching, Nas. Were you watching it in Chelmsford?
I was watching it at home in Chelmsford with a glass of Chardonnay. Very disappointed in the result. I had a bad weekend now because of the test finishing in a couple of days. I watched Hutton Cricket Club lose to Chelmsford Cricket Club in a big rivalry game, top v bottom clash. Then watched Wimbledon, which I enjoyed, and then watched the footy, which was a bit predictable, wasn't it? Spain, the best side in the comp. So, bit disappointed. And you, where were you watching it?
Well, like a complete sado, I was watching it at home alone.
On your own?
Yeah, the boy was in town. The girl had gone to Spoons in St Albans, so she was watching it there, which left me on my own. I mean, we can keep the analysis pretty short here, can't we, on the Sky Cricket podcast? Unlike ITV and BBC raking over it for an hour. Best team won, I reckon.
Thank you, Gary Neville.
They were a fantastic team to watch, weren't they? I mean, just put England's misery and disappointment to one side. What a team that Spanish team is.
Yeah, they are and have been for a while, really. So, I mean, England, they look like England are a good side. If you look at all the names on a team sheet, they are a very, very good side, and probably a bit disappointed in the manner and style, the way they played. All the pundits felt that they should go, be a bit more attacking, be a bit more Bazbally. I think Stokes went to see him, didn't he? Stokes went to have a big chat with them about being a bit more Bazbally, and they weren't Bazbally. Come on, get Stokes and McCullum there again. Get them in charge.
Well, this is called the Sky Cricket podcast, not the Sky Football podcast. So let's reflect a little bit on the Lord's Test, which was a dismal test, but a great occasion in funny ways. I mean, the test only lasted 2.5 days, or two days and a session, or 2 days and an hour, and was very one sided. But the occasion was significant, obviously, because it was Jimmy Anderson's farewell. So 188 tests, more than 40,000 deliveries in Test match cricket, and 704 wickets is the final tally, which will never be beaten, Nas.
Yeah, I noted your words actually at the end there. You're very careful with your words, and sometimes you say will probably not be beaten or may never be beaten. You were very clear, this will never be beaten. And it's a reflection. It was a great occasion, the 2 and a bit days, but it was also a reflection of where Test match cricket is at the moment. And I know we'll come on to that. And having you at the end there talk to Jimmy about what Test match cricket meant to him, I thought was very poignant. I think as far as England go and as far as Jimmy goes, I don't think the 2 days and an hour could have gone any better. His last wicket, Joshua De Silva, was an absolute jaffer, an absolute pearler. What a way to get your final wicket. Yeah, he could have taken the catch and it could have been the broad fairy tale ending, but I think what you got from that day or 2 days was what he would have got from it was what he meant. Sometimes when you're in the bubble and you're playing and you're focused on your game, I don't think you sometimes realize what you mean to the paying public and the England cricket supporters. I think what he would have got, not just the people at Lords, but social media, what Jimmy Anderson means to England supporters and England fans. And also, I was lucky to be in the dressing room and watching all his team around that home dressing room, listening to him and the respect they showed. I think you also got a sense of what Jimmy meant to his teammates. And I think that's why you play the game, isn't it? I don't know about you, but what you mean to people that come and pay their money and also what you mean to your teammates. So I thought it went pretty well. I've not asked your opinion because you often do presentations and things like that. Forget the occasion. Jimmy, the cricketer, and Jimmy in general, you did a lovely piece where you read out that sort of out of that book.
For Jimmy Anderson, it moves late and lots. He's possibly the best swing bowler there has ever been.
What does Jimmy mean to English cricket?
I think it's a good question because when you see an occasion like that, I mean, it was a capacity crowd, wasn't it, that came in. People would have obviously bought their tickets in advance, but I would imagine on some other days, just faced with the maximum of maybe 50 minutes, an hour's cricket, a lot of people might have said, "Well, I'm not bothered today." But people wanted to come in to say their goodbyes to Jimmy Anderson. I mean, it's a number of factors, but I think sport most of all is a connection. Actually, it's if I think back to when I was growing up, my first memory of sport, one of my earliest memories, is when my dad took me to United's ground, Old Trafford, and I met Matt Busby, and my dad played a little bit at United, and I met Jimmy Murphy, who was the coach, and Matt Busby, and I was 7 years of age, and it kind of stayed with me, really. It stayed with me, that memory, forevermore. So I've always been a Man United fan. My dad played for them. My son is a Man United fan. I did the same for my lad when he was 7. I took him down there for the first time to Old Trafford. So I think sport is about connections, first of all. And Jimmy Anderson has been there for such a long period of time. You know, there are people who would have watched him when they were young men in 2003 playing their first test match, and suddenly they're middle-aged men now, and they're probably introducing their children to Jimmy Anderson, getting them to watch him. And so the connections with sport and the family connections roll on. So I think that's one part of it. Just because of the longevity, it's something that people can almost mark their lives by. They're moving from either young age to middle age or middle age to old age. So I think that's one part of it. Secondly, is just his excellence. And, you draw lots of lessons from sport, and all the lessons you really draw from Jimmy Anderson are good ones. A desire to keep getting better, high excellence for such a long period of time, driving himself forward, a great competitive spirit. All the good things that you draw from sport, you can take from Jimmy Anderson's career. And then the bit that I asked him at the end, really, I was very in the the presentation that you mentioned, I was very deliberate to ask him about Test cricket, because I was if you remember, the last podcast we did was on the morning of his pre-match interview. I was at Lord's and I was about to go and listen to him, and he said one thing that struck me in that press conference. He said, Test cricket has literally made me the person I am. So all the lessons that he's drawn from Test cricket, the ups, the downs, the the high moments, the lows, the coming back for that third spell at 6 o'clock in the evening and having to dig deep within yourself. So all the things that have made him the kind of mature person that he is, he's kind of, Test cricket has helped him along the way. So I wanted to ask him about Test cricket in particular, because as you say, it's at a fragile time. He's going to move on to a mentoring role now. And you hope that, because there'll be young players coming through now, like Gus Atkinson, Josh Tong, Pennington, all these guys who are going to take the torch on from Jimmy. They will have career choices to make. And you kind of like to feel that Jimmy might just say to them, sometimes the easiest choices are not always the most rewarding or most fulfilling. The big check is not always the thing that you're going to get most from, although everybody needs to, pay the bills and pay the mortgage. One understands that. So I took a lot from it, really. I was thrilled that he got a good week. I've known him a long time, obviously, and a special affection and affinity because he's a Lancashire boy, and he'll undoubtedly go down as Lancashire's greatest ever player. I enjoyed your bit in the dressing room, by the way. I had lost a lot of money on Jimmy this week because I thought there were guaranteed to be tears. I would have put a monster bet on there being some tears from Jimmy Anderson this week, but he held it together pretty well. And your bottom lip was wobbling. You were close to tears, and I thought, you're getting a bit soft and sentimental in your old age.
It's business as usual. Stick to your game. Do what you've done for 21 years, and try and hold back those tears. Have you been able to do it?
Yeah, I think I've. Obviously, this morning was quite emotional with the two teams lined up, and the reaction from the crowd was pretty special.
That was the first WhatsApp you sent me after that interview. I don't know about that. It was a lovely moment. I mean, we don't get let in there that often. We've obviously been in there, the pair of us. So it was nice for the viewer to be able to see inside the dressing room. And I thought it was going to be like that Ian Ward moment where you just, I thought it'd be champagne, but it'd be Guinness with this regime. You'd be absolutely splattered with Guinness or whatever. And I was just struck by the silence. It threw me a little bit. It's like you're sitting next to him and the silence, and you look round and all the great and good of English cricket are in there hanging on every word Jimmy is giving them. So the respect for Anderson in that dressing room was absolutely immense. That's what I got from those 5 minutes of being in there.
How
I
quickly
love
did
your
he
little.
neck that Guinness on the balcony, by the way?
He
He
did,
necked that in
yeah.
about 2 seconds.
Absolutely, yeah. So I'll tell you another thing. If I'm Joe Root in about 5 years' time and I see you going anywhere near a library with glasses and a book in hand, I mean, we've had one from Broad. You're sat there with your glasses on the end of your beak like that, reading from this book about Broad about a few months ago. Now on Jimmy. So yeah, it's going to be weird, isn't it? It's like the Ambrose and Walsh moment. It's like the Donald Pollard, Vast, Murley, McGrath and Warne. We are now going into an era of English cricket without Broad and Anderson. 704 and 604. Incredible.
Absolutely. I mean, England captains have been so lucky for so long, really. If you think back to probably 2008 was the point at which Broad and Anderson really took things on from Harmus and Hoggard and that great attack that had been around 2005. So that's what 16 years pretty much that England captains have had it good. And we're probably about to find out how good they've had it now that both have moved on. So he's moving into a coaching and a mentoring role. Do we think he'll be a good coach?
Yeah, I think he'll be a man of few words. I don't think he's going to be I don't think he's going to be an in your face sort of coach, is he? He's not going to be like, come on, why are you doing this? What are you doing that? I think he'll let a cricketer come to him and chat, but you can't doubt the knowledge, and the experience. And he spoke to you about it. He spoke about conditions and pitches and field settings and grips and batters and how to set them up. All that he absolutely knows inside out. So Gus Atkinson, the baton's been passed on. Did you feel for him at all? I mean, anyone else making a debut and getting 12th for the whole story would have been about Gus Atkinson, when actually it was all about Jimmy. So he may have just enjoyed going under the radar. He seems quite a quiet, unassuming sort of lad that bowled brilliantly.
Yeah, I think a bit like Jimmy, he's a man of few words, is Gus Atkinson. I thought he took to it brilliantly. I mean, I think it's a big help when you've been around the team for a while. It's not like perhaps back in the day where you just thrust into the team and you might not have met some of your teammates before or don't know anything about the setup. He's been around that team for a year now. He's been part of 2 World Cups. He's been part of a white ball tours. He went to India for the 5 Test match tour. So although he got his cap from Ollie Pope that morning, it didn't feel like this was a new player coming in. It was almost as if England had been prepping him for this moment. And then he bowled really well, didn't he? He just seems to keep it pretty simple to me. He runs in, hits the pitch hard, bowls straight. He can stand the seam up and he can wobble it around and bowl that 3/4 seam to the left-handers. But that's about the extent of it. Bowled pretty quick. Challenge the stumps, and he looks to have some attributes there that will stand him in good stead. I mean, it's going to get tougher for him for sure. 12 for on debut, 7 and 5 against what looked like a pretty undercut West Indies team. But I think he's got, if you talk about quick bowlers and what you're looking for in international cricket, you generally say 2 or 3 things, don't you? Pace, accuracy, and skill, movement, whatever. And he's certainly got 2 of those. 3, if all 3 really. He's quick enough. He looked accurate, and he's got enough skill with the ball. So I think he's going to be around for a little while. What do you reckon?
Yeah. I mean, we sometimes build cricketers up too much, but he has got all the attributes. Obviously, as a fast bowler, you have to stay fit. So once Jofra started, we would have been saying exactly the same about Joff. In fact, his action and the way he bowls through his action reminds me of Joff a little bit. I'd have hated facing him a bit because there's no real gather. And when the bouncer's coming with some bowlers, they show you it. With Atkinson, he's just through with a quick arm and through his action. And that's another thing that England have been lacking at times, is someone that can blast away the tail. Tail have done pretty well against England, lower order batters and bowlers. So that hostility and that pace and that bouncer will be used. I mean, Jason Holder's a proper batter, but Holder getting bounced out late on day 2, and then the way he bowled to the tail. So he has got everything. You just have fingers crossed that he stays fit and he's looked after. And that desire, that's the whole point of the Jimmy Anderson story, the desire to keep improving every single day and get better, and love Test match cricket and not be swayed in other directions. And if you are swayed, then to make sure you try and get yourself fit and ready for the next Test series or Test match that's coming up. So, and the other debutant is Surrey teammate Jamie Smith. Impressive.
Yeah, three other things I wanted to touch on about a Test match. Jamie Smith, obviously the other debutant. Ben Stokes' return as an all-rounder, and England's catching, which was top-notch. Before we move on to the West Indies, let's just reflect on those three things. Jamie Smith, first of all, he's keeping. I thought, I mean, he didn't have that much to do, but Lords is not an easy place sometimes to come and keep the ball. For some reason at Lords, it seems to duck around a little bit more. You know, I've seen keepers there have really difficult time. I remember Andy Flower had a stinker there for Zimbabwe in a Test match. MS Dhoni had a really difficult game some years ago. The ball seems to swerve around. So I can't think of a gather that he, you know, didn't take cleanly. And for a tall lad, he's 6'2". He seemed to move well and quite agile down low, taking catches. So I thought, first of all, his keeping was pretty good, because that's an important thing. We know he's got high standards with the bat. We know he's an exciting young player. But if the keeping was iffy, you know, that always had a chance of affecting his batting. So I think that was the first thing to note, really.
Yeah, and the batting, I was never concerned about the batting at all. Having seen him the last couple of years in all formats, he's a really talented young batter, and obviously fits the tempo and the brand and the style of exactly what England need. In fact, England played, I know they went to over 4 and over, but they just played decent attacking cricket. There was no reverse scoops from Root, and even Jamie Smith didn't go out there, you know, swinging from the backside, almost like, this is how I play, this is why I'm in the side. You know, and I've seen it for Surrey against Essex last season when Surrey needed to bat out. Jamie Smith can play in different ways. So I knew he's a proper batter. But the key was batting with the tail, and it set it up perfectly for him, because for all that Ben Foakes is keeping and also his batting, Ben Foakes is a very decent batter. But in India, when he got stuck with the tail, England went nowhere. Whereas at Lords, Jamie Smith, when he got stuck with the tail, he just swung it out the park, really, some massive sixes. So I think it was a really good debut for him. And your point on Stokes is an excellent one. That was another tick for England. Something probably we should have touched on a bit more in the last podcast. We focused a bit with the West Indies and Bish, but I think it's one of the biggest things that come out this summer, watching Stokes bowl for Durham and bowling those long spells, and then meeting him in person and seeing how fit and lean and how good the knee operation has gone. I think that's a massive bonus for England, isn't it?
Yeah, he does look very lean when you see him close up. And he's bowled those long spells for Durham that you mentioned, and 2 long spells in this Test match. 8 overs in the first innings, 10 in the second. I mean, he'll just have to be slightly careful that he doesn't.
Yeah, I was going to say too long, as in TWO or TOO. You know, were they too long or not?
Well, I mean, you know, there is a danger these days that, you know, you kind of worry too much about bowlers. I think you have to bowl if you're a bowler, but obviously on the back of his knee injury, you just hope that he knows exactly what he's doing. But he is somebody who likes to almost like punish himself, isn't he, with his bowling? He likes to bowl himself to the brink of exhaustion. But it's a massive thing for England. I mean, it's just looks a totally different side when he can play as a full all-rounder. I think it's better for him because he's just a bit of an action man. And when he stood in the field and he can't bowl, he kind of feels half the cricketer, really. So to have him back and right in there in all 3 facets of the game just makes England look a better side, and meant, of course, that Shoaib Bashir didn't bowl an over. He could just keep battering away with 4 seamers. And the catching, I mentioned the catching. I was chatting to Brodie actually a little bit on that last day and just asking him. He was saying the worst time for him as a bowler was in that COVID period when England were chopping and changing their side to try and, you know, rest people and get them out of the bubble. And so the team kept changing, and he kept looking up to the slip cordon, and there were different people in there.
Was he talking about his drop catches? Still going on about his drop catches?
Well, yeah, he's got a little black book there of drop catches. But it's true, isn't it? The best slip cordons that you see are ones that are rock solid and the same personnel all the time. And looking at the way England lined up there with Root, Crawley, and Brook at 1, 2, 3, you kind of feel they're going to be around for the next 2 or 3 years, and therefore a really good chance to develop a top class slip catching cordon. Which if you're looking to develop a core of fast bowlers, that you need that as well.
Brook was the pick, wasn't he? That catch was almost Stokes at Trent Bridge diving to his right, inches off the ground. And you're right, they look sharp. They look sharp in the field. Even Jimmy towards the end there was diving and pulling him in. I think it was almost the perfect performance. The only thing, you could be a bit more ruthless with the bat. I think there were 5 half centuries in there, all looking good, all playing really well. Harry Brook maybe needs to decide what he's going to do with the short ball. He's been out 5 times to bouncers now in his short career. What's he going to do with it? He occasionally hits it for 6. He occasionally gets out. Root looked in great touch. They all looked in pretty good touch. So maybe a bit more ruthless with the bat. Go and get some big hundreds.
But it was a disappointing test, really. 2 days, an hour, no sense of it being a really highly competitive game. It felt it was a good toss to win, obviously, for England. But when West Indies were bundled out for 120 on that first day, you kind of felt there was an inevitability to the end result. So what do we make of West Indies? I mean, we talked about Gus Atkinson a moment ago. England obviously pulled him out of the IPL. He was picked up in the draft or the auction, and they pulled him out, and he played for Surrey to get ready for the Test series. Obviously, England have the financial resources to be able to do that in a way that West Indies can't. So for Alzari Joseph and Shamar Joseph in particular, they're coming into the Test series on the back of essentially T20 bowling. It's quite hard to get your loads up, isn't it, when that's all you're doing? I think we worked out that Shamar bowled 14 overs in competitive cricket since that Test match in Brisbane. Obviously, they're doing a lot of work in training and nets as well. But I thought that those two in particular looked a little bit rusty.
Yeah, I mean, if you look at the Test match, basically, sounds like really rocket science, Nas, but basically people who had been playing red ball cricket domestically that were the ones that performed. So you look at Crawley, you look at Root, you look at Brook, you look at Jaden Seals for, obviously Atkinson, Jimmy, you look at Jaden Seals for the West Indies, who's been playing from Sussex. He'd pick of the bowlers, and the fitness and the energy was there. You cannot go from playing in Brisbane in January to bowling a few overs in the nets, carrying the drinks in the World T20, to rocking up at Lords and playing there in a Test match. You just can't as a bowler. It's hard enough as a batter. I think modern batters cope better. But I think as a bowler, there's the physical side, but also there's the emotional, something Stuart talks about a lot, the adrenaline, first day of a Test match, first time playing at Lords, and what it takes. I think it was 9 overs, and then he goes down in a heap with cramp and stiffness. And then the debate, should they have picked him, really? And should they pick him for the next one? West Indies, you look at them in Australia, they get better. They turn up for one warm-up game here at 3-day game against a select 11. He wasn't there for there because of the hurricane. So, what do they do with him? And should they have picked him? It's such a difficult. It's where those 2 days summed up for me. It summed up where we are with Test match cricket. You talk about the lads that are on. You're talking about Nicholas Pooran or Shea Hope or Hetmeyer and all the batting that they could have, but they're off in a white ball sunset. You've got bowlers that haven't bowled. You've got undercooked cricketers. And then you lose the toss and you have the worst of conditions. Everyone goes, oh, well, there you go. Test match cricket is dying. Well, if you prepare for a Test match like that, you'll get exactly what England get when they go away. Or, it frustrates me. Honestly, it frustrates me that you've got to give Test matches the preparation that it deserves. And I know that's an easy thing to say, but very difficult thing to do in modern times.
Frustrated me as well, because we spent an arm and a leg getting up to Baracara to do the documentary on Shamar. We were going to show it on Saturday lunchtime. We didn't get on Friday lunchtime. The game didn't last that long. So we never got to see it, and I think we're going to show it at Trent Bridge on the first day. So, But I agree with you. You have to give it that care and attention, Test cricket. But as you say, that is more easily said than done because of the scheduling and cricket just devouring itself, and the IPL and then the World T20, and then suddenly you're into a Test match. Where do you find the space and the time to do that?
And it's not,
So
the other story about our West Indies are in terminal decline. England haven't won in the Caribbean or series for 2 decades or whatever. They hold the Richards Botham Trophy. England travel to India and don't particularly do well, or Australia and don't particularly do well. So it shouldn't just be a West Indies story, and all it does is add to the fact that Test match cricket is in a difficult place, and then it's sort of self-perpetuating. Do you know what I'm trying to say? If you don't look after it, then sides turn up and put in a performance like that, and then everyone goes, "Well, told you Test match cricket's dying." Well, I know you were at that MCC day, and when they try to look at all these things, I don't know what the answer is, but listening to you speaking to Jimmy Anderson after 188 Test matches on the podium there, I'd like to think we would try and look after Test match cricket.
Well, yeah, I mean, I think but I've been banging this drum for 15 years now, from the moment that the free market comes into the game and players are given choices. It was obvious to me that unless you look at it carefully and regulate things and try and create a calendar that does have space in it, that it's going to be very difficult.
Are they doing that?
Because the choices for
Are they? Is there any?
No,
we've been hearing this for a while. Is there any? How do we do that?
Yeah, no. I think it's late now. It's late in the day. These kind of discussions should have been happening in 2008, 2009, 2010, when it was obvious what the effects of franchise cricket and T20 cricket was going to have on the long format of the game. But I'm afraid those, it's very late in the day now, put it that way. So West Indies batting. So that's really the area that they've got to try and improve at Trent Bridge, because I think we feel that the bowlers might be better for the run, and they've got threat there if they can get runs on the board. And when you look at the top order there, which is something we picked out quite heavily with Bish, that 2, 3, 4, 5, I think before the Test match they had 9 caps between them. It is a big ask, isn't it? If we think the bowlers are going to come on for the run, can the batters come on for the run in such a short period of time and get better?
Well, Trent Bridge is a better pitch usually. I've been looking at county scores. I was with this game at Hutton. I was at Ben Debenham, who's an umpire. He did that. His last game was at Trent Bridge. And he said by last day it was incredibly flat. Jack Leach was, toiling away the Somerset Nottinghamshire game. So it can be a better pitch there. It can swing around a bit as well. But so you'd hope so. It was a bad combination for the West Indies. They had their 2 experienced batters in Brathwaite and Holder. Brathwaite has struggled for a little while now, and Holder was obviously coming back from injury. They didn't get any. And in between is that inexperience. Alzari Joseph, another experienced cricketer, had a bad game. So their younger, inexperienced cricketers didn't have great games, and their experienced cricketers struggled as well. Motti I thought, had a really good game with ball and bat towards the end. It's the tempo of their batting, whether they tried hard and they battled and they got their heads down and they tried to get a score. They've got Jimmy Adams. That's how he would have played it. It's whether they should try and be a bit more positive and try and put the onus and the pressure back on to the England bowlers, go at them a little bit more. Easier said than done. But if you just sit there against this England seam attack, I think eventually you may feel there's a ball with your name on it. So I'd like to see a bit more intent from their batters. It doesn't mean, something Bish talks about a lot. He talks about rotating the strike. Louis comes a long way forward and gets on that front foot, whereas Brathwaite sits back. So if they're constantly rotating the strike, then bowlers have to adjust their lengths. So it doesn't mean intent going out there and swinging from the backside. It means dropping and running and putting the bad ball away. So I'd like to see a bit more intent from that batting lineup.
And England have got to make a change. So Mark Wood has come into the squad. So they've got to pick one of Wood or Pennington. What do you think? I mean, Mark Wood is the senior player. Do you think he'll just come straight in?
I think so. Wood and Atkinson. I asked Brody a question on commentary whether they could play together. I see no reason why West Indies played 4 out-and-out quicks for all those years. So
Yeah.
I see no reason why.
And I mean, we talked about the bowlers getting their loads up. That's why
Yes, true.
Wood was not in that first test. You know, he's come back from the World T20. Presumably, in the meantime, he's been bowling quite a significant amount to get those loads up. So he's
Yeah,
ready
or
for
they
the
could
test
go
match.
for the emotional one. Obviously, you know, Pennington now plays at Trent Bridge, so not a bad place to start for him. And it's something we haven't touched on, isn't it? There must be something right going on in that dressing room, that every single player that comes in and does well and gets a 5-wicket haul or gets runs. But it also the much derided sort of county cricket, and it doesn't set you up for international cricket. There must be good things going on in county cricket, that these lads are coming in ready for international cricket. Do you agree, or is it
Yeah, I mean, if you look at the most recent debuts, you know, Atkinson obviously 12 wickets. Josh Tong in the Ashes, he picked up a 5, didn't he? Tom Hartley in India,
Rayan?
all those wickets in Hyderabad, Rayan Ahmed in Karachi. So I think it's a pretty good environment to come into it. You know, when you see Brendan McCullum sat there on the Lord's balcony with his feet, he doesn't look like a man stressed out by the job. So I suspect it's a very calm, welcoming, laid back environment to come into, which probably is a
what do
help.
you think West Indies will do with their side? I mean, you're desperate for Shamar to play, so your award-winning documentary can finally go out, or will they make a change, do you think?
I
Would
don't
they have
know.
Jeremiah Louis could come in, couldn't he?
He could do. The fact that Shamar was bowling on that last day suggested it was cramp rather than a hamstring strain. So they may just feel, as in, you know, in Australia, Brisbane, that he will be better for the run. Alzari Joseph will be better for the run. I think if they're fit, they might play them again. But we shall see. That's all ahead of us. You've got a nice week coming up. Nottingham is your boy's university, and he's got his graduation in criminology.
I still don't know. He's bluffed his way for 3 years. He did actually. I was for the one time in my life, and I've got to be careful how I say this, but I was useful to him because his dissertation was on spot fixing and match fixing, and he came to me and Dad, can you help me?
You pulled out all your contacts. You pulled out all your contacts because he
all my
rang
brown
me.
envelopes. Like, cheers, Joel. So yeah, he graduates on Friday. His best mate graduates on Wednesday at Loughborough, so it could be after the football last night. His liver may take a bit of damage this week. So I enjoyed the Trent Bridge test. It's a great ground. Hopefully the West Indies, as they have done in the past, they're a very proud cricketing nation, as they showed in Australia when they came back at the Gabba. Hopefully they'll put on a much better fight.
Yeah, it's usually the grand slam of naans for us at Trent Bridge, because there's about 5 curry houses up the Maid Marian Way where we stay. So it's usually a curry fest for us. Looking forward to that. We'll head up to Trent Bridge on Wednesday. Game starts Thursday. Fingers crossed for a competitive and good test match. And we will pod on the far side of that.